I'm Melissa, 34, and I never imagined the most painful words I'd ever hear would come from my own mother. "Your son isn't our grandson," she said, looking down at my newborn baby in the hospital. My son was only 6 hours old when my family rejected him. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I looked at my little Jake in my arms and made a decision that would change everything. After 12 years of paying for my entire family's health insurance, $18,480 every single year, I simply picked up my phone, called my lawyer, and said, "I need to start the process to change my son's last name and remove some people from my health plan." 1 week later, they found out what it meant to lose someone who had always been there for them. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. I grew up in a family where my younger sister, Amber, was always the favorite. While I started working at 16 to help with bills, Amber got new cars for her birthdays. When I went to college, I paid for everything myself, while my parents covered all of Amber's tuition. "Amber is more sensitive. She needs more support," my mom always said. At 22, freshly graduated with a good job in healthcare administration, I offered to put my parents on my employer health plan when my dad lost his job. What was supposed to be temporary became permanent. Later, when Amber temporarily lost her work plan, my parents begged me to add her just for a few months, along with her husband Greg. As always, temporary became permanent. Even with this financial burden, I kept trying to earn my parents' approval. I naively bought a house just 15 minutes from theirs, believing physical proximity could compensate for emotional distance. I visited them 3 times a week, brought dinner when they were sick. Amber rarely showed up, but was always the perfect daughter in the stories my mom told her friends. What I haven't mentioned yet is that my family was extremely traditional, to use a soft term. I grew up hearing prejudiced comments about people of other ethnicities, especially against Black people. I tried questioning these views sometimes when I was younger, but was always silenced with, "That's how we were raised," or "You'll understand when you're older." When I was 31, I met David. Smart, kind, hardworking, and he loved me in a way I'd never experienced before. David, a dedicated software engineer, is also Black, something I knew would be an issue for my family. When I introduced him to my parents 6 months after we started dating, the reaction was exactly what I feared. Polite to his face, but as soon as we left, my mother asked, "Couldn't you find someone more like you?" David, always diplomatic, endured their veiled comments and uncomfortable glances with a dignity that only made me admire him more. When my dad once asked if he grew up in a rough neighborhood, David calmly explained how his parents were university professors and how he grew up in a quiet suburb, leaving my father speechless. Despite their disapproval, David and I fell deeper in love. After a year and a half together, we got engaged, shortly before I turned 33. There was no engagement party my parents said they were saving for Amber's wedding, though she wasn't even engaged at the time. The truth they wouldn't openly say was that they didn't want to celebrate our union. We decided not to wait for the big wedding I'd always dreamed of, and knew my family would never support. 3 months after getting engaged, we married in an intimate ceremony at a botanical garden, just close friends and David's family. My parents and Amber declined the invitation with vague excuses. When I got pregnant a few months after the wedding, still at 33, I thought maybe this would change things. I was wrong. I organized a special dinner to share the pregnancy news. I bought expensive grandpa and grandma gifts. The reaction? An uncomfortable silence followed by, "Are you sure it's a good idea to bring a child like that into the world?" I knew exactly what they meant. Still, I kept trying. I invited them to every ultrasound appointment. They never showed up. I asked for opinions on baby names. I got evasive answers. In one last desperate attempt to win their approval, I used my annual $5,000 bonus to renovate their guest bedroom and transform it into a space for their grandchild. "This way you can spend quality time with the baby," I explained, pretending not to notice the uncomfortable look between them. All this while, I continued paying for the premium health plan that covered all my dad's expensive diabetes medications and my mom's frequent dermatology appointments. The breaking point came earlier than I expected. Labor started 3 weeks before my due date. David rushed me to the hospital at 2 a.m. and messaged my parents. They replied they would come when the sun is up. I spent 14 hours in labor. My sister didn't even respond to the messages. When Jake finally arrived, it was the happiest moment of my life. David was radiant, tears in his eyes as he held our son for the first time. Jake had slightly lighter skin than David, but with his beautiful features and the same expressive eyes. After we settled in the room, my parents finally arrived. I immediately saw the expression on my mother's face when she looked at Jake, a mixture of shock and poorly disguised disapproval. She observed every detail of him, from his skin tone to his little curls, looking for something to criticize. "Can I talk to you privately?" she asked, her voice tense. In the hallway, away from David's ears, my mother said the words I'll never forget. "Melissa, do you really want to do this? Raise a child who will face so many challenges? You know how people will look at you on the street. Your son isn't our grandson. We won't accept this in our family." I didn't respond immediately. My hands trembled, but I held myself together. I simply walked back to the room, a strange calm washing over me. David looked at me questioningly. I just shook my head slightly. I couldn't speak yet. The weight of my mother's rejection was crushing, but something else was happening inside me. A realization, a clarity I had never experienced before. For 34 years, I had bent over backwards trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I had financially supported the people who couldn't even support me emotionally. I had made excuses for their behavior, their prejudice, their obvious favoritism. And now they were rejecting my innocent newborn son because of the color of his skin. In that moment, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting my child from the toxicity I had endured my entire life. A nurse named Keisha came in to check Jake's vitals. She must have noticed something in my expression. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked gently. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. I told her what had happened, what my mother had said. Keisha, who was also Black, took my hand and said something that changed my perspective forever. "Sweetheart, that's not normal. You're not the one who's wrong here. It's your family. Your son is beautiful and perfect, exactly as he is." That night, alone with Jake while David went home to get some things, I looked down at my perfect son and made a promise to him and to myself. The cycle of toxicity would end with me. I took out my phone and began to make a list, trying even harder. In the days that followed, my parents didn't return to the hospital. My sister sent a message saying, "Mom is very upset about how you reacted to her comments, and that I should try to understand they're from a different generation." Meanwhile, work friends, neighbors, and even distant colleagues sent gifts, meals, and messages of support. Many came in person to meet Jake, admiring how beautiful and perfect he was. David's parents flew in from Texas the following week to meet their grandson, bringing not just gifts but unconditional love, a painful contrast to my own family. The difference between these reactions and my family's was striking. At night, while feeding Jake, I started mentally calculating how much I had given my family over the years. The health plan alone added up to more than $220,000 in 12 years. Loans never repaid for my sister's car, for my parents' home renovation, for their vacations. Easily another $80,000. Not counting the time, the emotional energy, the countless times I put their needs above mine. And what did I get in return? Rejection of my husband because of his skin color. Rejection of my son, their own blood, for the same reason. It was hard to admit that my own parents were racist, but I could no longer deny the reality. The way they treated my son had no other name. David returned with food and found me making lists on my phone. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Planning our future," I replied. "A future where our son will be loved and respected for who he is." Have you ever been taken for granted by family members no matter how much you gave? Tell me in the comments how you handled it while we continue this story. The first week at home with Jake was a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the overwhelming love I felt for this tiny human who depended on me. Each time I looked at his perfect face, I felt more certain about my decision. My parents called twice. I didn't answer. My sister sent 3 text messages asking why I was being so dramatic and saying I needed to get over it. I forwarded these messages to my therapist, whom I had started seeing during my pregnancy when my family's reaction to it had triggered anxiety attacks. She had been a lifeline during those difficult months, helping me navigate the stress of preparing for motherhood while dealing with my family's prejudice. What would you tell a friend whose family rejected her child because of his race? My therapist had asked me in our session before Jake was born. I'd tell her to protect her child at all costs. I had answered without hesitation. Then why is it so hard to give yourself the same advice? That question had haunted me for weeks. Now, looking at the messages from my family, I finally had clarity. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about Jake. On day 8, I made 3 important calls. First, I called my lawyer, Mark. I explained the situation and asked him to start the process for changing Jake's last name. Instead of the combined family names we had initially planned, he would have only David's last name. "I can start the paperwork today," Mark assured me. "Given the circumstances, I think we have a strong case for expediting this." Second, I called HR at my company. "I need to make changes to my health plan due to significant family changes," I explained. The representative was understanding and confirmed that the birth of the baby qualified as a life event that allowed immediate changes to the plan. Due to my connections in the HR department from my work in healthcare administration, they agreed to process my case with exceptional urgency. The changes will take effect as soon as the system updates, probably next week, she assured me. Third, I called my therapist and scheduled an emergency session for the following day. I needed additional support through this challenging time. I didn't call my parents. I didn't send baby pictures. I simply stopped. 3 days later, I received the first of many indignant messages from my mother. Why aren't we getting updates about the baby? We're the grandparents. We have a right to know. I replied with a simple message. You made it very clear that you don't consider Jake your grandson. I'm respecting your decision. The final betrayal. My phone exploded with notifications. 5 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my father, 7 text messages in rapid succession. You're being ridiculous. We never said that. You're twisting our words. This is so like you to overreact. I showed the messages to David. He sat beside me on our bed, Jake sleeping peacefully in his bassinet nearby. You don't have to respond, he said gently. Not until you're ready. I nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. I had spent my entire life responding immediately to my family's demands, always afraid of disappointing them more than I already had simply by existing. What if they're right? I whispered. What if I am overreacting? David took my hands in his. Melissa, your mother told you that our son, her grandson, isn't part of your family because he's mixed race. That's not something you're imagining or exaggerating. Those were her exact words. Tears filled my eyes. I know. I've always been the one to fix things, to make peace. What if I'm making a mistake? Look at him, David said, nodding toward our sleeping son. Would you let anyone talk about him that way once he's old enough to understand? Would you let anyone make him feel less than perfect because of the color of his skin? I looked at Jake's peaceful face, his tiny fingers curled into fists, his chest rising and falling with each breath. The fierce love I felt for him clarified everything. No, I said firmly. Never. That night, I drafted a longer email to my parents. I explained exactly what had hurt me, recounted their exact words, and outlined what would need to change for us to have any relationship moving forward. I told them they would need to acknowledge their prejudice and commit to treating my son, their grandson, with the same love and respect they would show any child. I also informed them about the health insurance change. I have supported you financially for 12 years, I wrote. I have given you over $220,000 in health insurance coverage alone, not counting loans and gifts, but I cannot continue to support people who reject my son because of his race. You have Medicare. You can add supplemental coverage. Or you can ask Amber, since she's the daughter you've always invested in. I read the email to David before sending it. Are you sure about this? He asked. Once you hit send, there's no going back. I nodded. I'm sure. For the first time in my life, I'm completely sure about setting a boundary with them. I hit send, then turned off my phone for the night. Whatever fallout came, I would deal with it tomorrow. Tonight was for my family, my real family. David, Jake, and me. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Jake's soft cries. As I fed him, I checked my phone. No response from my parents, just a text from my sister. Mom and Dad are devastated. How could you do this to them? I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw my parents standing on the porch, their expressions a mixture of anger and confusion. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Jake was napping, and I didn't want their inevitable outburst to wake him. What is the meaning of this? My father thrust a letter from the health insurance company at me. It was the notification that they were no longer covered. We received this much faster than expected. The system usually takes weeks to process these changes. It means exactly what you're seeing, I replied calmly. You don't consider my son part of the family because of his skin color, so it doesn't make sense for me to continue considering you part of my financial responsibility. You can't do this, my mother shouted. Your father needs those medications. I have my appointment scheduled. I can and I did, I replied. You have Medicare. You can add supplemental coverage, or ask Amber for help since she's the daughter you've always invested in. Is this because of that comment at the hospital? My mother asked incredulously. I was just thinking about his future. You're overreacting as always. David appeared behind me, holding Jake, who had woken up from the shouting. I think you should leave now, he said firmly, and only come back when you're ready to accept and love our son exactly as he is. My father's face reddened. This is ridiculous. We've done everything for you, and this is how you repay us? By listening to him instead of your own family? The old me would have apologized, would have tried to smooth things over, would have offered to fix the insurance situation just to keep the peace. But as I looked at my husband holding our son protectively, something shifted permanently inside me. David and Jake are my family, I said. My priority now is protecting my son from people who would make him feel less than perfect exactly as he is. If you can't see what's wrong with what you said and how you've acted, then we have nothing more to discuss. You'll regret this, my mother hissed. When you need us, we won't be there. I almost laughed. When have you ever been there for me when I really needed you? When have you ever put my needs before Amber's? When have you ever truly supported my choices without criticism? The shock on their faces told me they had never even considered these questions. Goodbye, I said, closing the door firmly. David put his free arm around me. Are you okay? I took a deep breath. Actually, yes. For the first time in a very long time, I feel free. The days that followed were a storm of manipulation attempts. My sister, who hadn't even cared about her nephew's birth, now called crying, saying I was killing our parents, and that I was the most selfish monster she had ever known. The reason for this sudden change? She would now have to help financially with our parents' medical costs, which would affect her comfortable lifestyle. Greg, her husband, whom I rarely saw at family gatherings, also started sending messages demanding that I fix the situation because they were having to rearrange their entire family budget. Text messages from my parents alternated between threats. We'll tell everyone what you did, and guilt. Your father had to reduce his medications. They never mentioned Jake or asked how he was doing. Aunt Linda, my mother's sister who had distanced herself from the family years ago after an argument with my mother about political opinions, suddenly reappeared as a mediator. She began calling me daily, trying to convince me to fix things. Your mother is devastated, she would say, without ever acknowledging what had caused the rift. The worst part was when my mother showed up at my workplace with tears in her eyes, telling everyone that I had abandoned the family when they needed me most. Fortunately, my boss, with whom I had shared the situation during my maternity leave, already knew the whole story and gently escorted my mother out. In my second therapy session after returning from the hospital, I cried as I realized how deeply programmed I was to feel guilty about establishing healthy boundaries. What would you say to a friend whose family rejected her child because of his skin color? My therapist asked. I'd say she's doing the right thing, I replied through tears. That she deserves respect, and that her child deserves grandparents who love him unconditionally. Then why is it so hard to say that to yourself? I didn't have an answer, but I knew I needed to find one for Jake's sake as much as my own. Processing the pain that night, I couldn't sleep. Jake was finally sleeping through most of the night, but I lay awake, replaying my entire relationship with my parents in my mind. The time I got straight A's in high school, but they focused on Amber's B in art class because she was trying so hard. The time I graduated college with honors, but they left the ceremony early because Amber felt sick. The time I got my first promotion, and they couldn't attend the celebration dinner because they had already promised to help Amber shop for furniture. Always Amber. Always someone else's needs before mine. But now there was Jake, and I would not let him grow up thinking he needed to earn love that should be freely given. I would not let him believe, even for a moment, that there was anything wrong with him because of his heritage. I got out of bed quietly, careful not to wake David. In the dim light of the nursery, I watched Jake sleeping peacefully. His perfect little face, his tiny fingers, the gentle rise and fall of his chest. I promise you, I whispered, you will always know how loved and perfect you are. Exactly as you are. The next morning, I called my therapist and requested an emergency session. I need to process this faster, I explained. I need to be stronger for my son. That afternoon, in her office, I finally let myself fall apart. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, mourning the relationship with my parents that I had always wanted but never truly had. They never loved me unconditionally, I finally admitted aloud. Not once in my entire life. My therapist nodded. And that's their failure, not yours. You deserved that love as a child, and Jake deserves it now. How do I stop feeling guilty? I asked. By recognizing that you're breaking a generational cycle, she said. By giving Jake what you never had. Over the next weeks, I focused on healing. I deleted the manipulative texts without reading them. I blocked my family's numbers during certain hours so I could sleep and be present with Jake. I started a journal where I wrote down every memory of conditional love, every instance of unfairness, every moment I had excused their behavior because that's just how they are. When written down, the pattern was undeniable. The favoritism, the control through financial help, the emotional manipulation, the casual racism that I had tried to ignore for David's sake. David was my rock through it all. He never pushed me to cut ties completely, but he also never suggested I should accept less than full respect for our family. Whatever you decide, I support you, he said. but I need to know that you'll protect Jake from anyone who would make him feel less than the perfect, beautiful boy he is. I will, I promised. Always. As Jake grew stronger each day, so did I. I returned to work part-time, finding a balance that worked for our family. David's parents visited again, showing me what supportive, loving grandparents looked like. The contrast was stark and healing. 1 month after the confrontation at our door, I received an email from my father. The subject line read, "Health insurance situation." I braced myself before opening it, expecting more guilt and manipulation. Instead, I found something surprising. "Melissa, your mother and I have been discussing the situation. While we still feel your reaction was extreme, we've managed to secure supplemental insurance through Medicare. Amber and Greg have also agreed to help with some costs. We would like to see our grandson when you're ready." No apology. No acknowledgement of their hurtful words. Just practical information and a request that centered their desires, rather than Jake's well-being. I showed the email to my therapist at our next session. "What do you think?" I asked. "What do you think?" she countered. I thought for a moment. I think they're starting to realize there are consequences to their actions, but they still don't understand what they did wrong. She nodded. "And what does that mean for your relationship with them?" "It means we're not ready for them to be in Jake's life yet," I said firmly. "Not until they can truly accept him and us exactly as we are." For the first time, choosing my child's well-being over my parents' expectations felt completely right. The paperwork for Jake's name change was moving slowly through the system. My lawyer, Mark, assured me that it would be finalized eventually, but bureaucracy took time. In the meantime, I continued building our new life, one free from the constant need to please people who could never be pleased. David received a promotion at work, which came with a significant salary increase. We started discussing the possibility of moving to a more diverse neighborhood, where Jake would grow up seeing families that looked like ours. "I don't want him to be the only biracial child in his school," I explained to David. "I agree," he said. "I grew up as one of only 3 black kids in my school. It was isolating." We started looking at houses in a neighboring town known for its diversity and excellent schools. The commute would be longer for both of us, but it felt like the right choice for Jake's future. Meanwhile, my sister ramped up her attempts to make me fix things. She called my office so often that my assistant started screening the calls. She sent emails with subject lines like, "Dad's health is declining and this is your fault." I forwarded each email to my therapist without responding. "You're doing well," my therapist assured me. "Setting boundaries is never easy, especially with family, but you're staying strong." Then came my father's birthday. Normally, I would have organized a big party, bought an expensive gift, and gone out of my way to make the day special. This time, I simply sent a card with a brief note. "Happy birthday, hope you have a great day." My mother called, furious. "Is that it? After everything we've done for you?" I took a deep breath before responding. "Mom, what exactly have you done for me that wasn't accompanied by criticism, comparisons, or conditions? And now you've rejected my son because of his skin color. How do you think he would feel growing up around people who think that way about him?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect, and when you accept my son unconditionally as part of the family, we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. Until then, I'm taking care of my family. David, Jake, and me. "You'll regret this," she said, before hanging up. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt at peace. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did it go for you? Share your experience while we reach the climax of this story. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Melissa, this is Uncle Robert, my father's brother, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. He lived in another state and rarely engaged with the family." "Uncle Robert? Is everything okay? Your father called me very upset. He told me you've cut them off and taken away their health insurance. He said you're being cruel and unreasonable." I sighed. "Did he tell you why?" "He said it was because they expressed concern about your mixed-race baby. But surely that's not the whole story." I explained exactly what had happened, my mother's exact words. Their rejection of Jake. The years of financial support I'd provided while receiving emotional scraps in return. "I see," he said when I finished. "That changes things." "They've been telling everyone I abandoned them," I said. "But they're the ones who rejected my son." "Your father didn't mention that part," Uncle Robert admitted. "Look, Melissa, I don't agree with their views. Your son is your son, period. I'd love to meet him someday." That conversation was the first hint that my parents' version of events wasn't being universally accepted by the extended family. It gave me strength to stay the course. 3 months after Jake's birth, the name change was finally approved. He would carry David's last name, breaking the connection to my family's legacy of conditional love and prejudice. We celebrated with a small gathering of friends who had supported us through everything. As I watched David proudly showing pictures of Jake to our friends, I realized something important. We had created our own family, one built on unconditional love, respect, and acceptance. Jake would grow up surrounded by people who saw him for exactly who he was and loved every part of him. That night, I wrote a final email to my parents. I informed them of Jake's official name change and explained that our door remained open, but only if they were willing to acknowledge their prejudice and commit to treating Jake with the love and respect he deserved. "He is your grandson," I wrote. "The only question is whether you want to be his grandparents." I didn't expect a response, and I didn't receive one, but sending that message felt like closing a chapter. I had done everything I could. The next move was theirs. A week later, my doorbell rang on Saturday morning. David was out for a run, and I was feeding Jake in the living room. Through the window, I saw my parents' car in the driveway. My heart pounded as I went to the door, Jake still in my arms. "Can we come in?" my mother asked. She was holding a gift bag. I hesitated, then nodded. "You can come in, but if you say anything hurtful about Jake, you'll need to leave immediately." They sat awkwardly on the edge of the sofa. My mother kept glancing at Jake, her expression unreadable. "We brought something for the baby," she finally said, pushing the gift bag toward me. Inside was a baby outfit with my family's last name embroidered on it. The name Jake no longer carried. "His name has been legally changed," I said quietly. "He has David's last name now." My father's face reddened. "That's ridiculous. He's a part of our family, too." "Is he?" I asked. "Because the last time we spoke, Mom made it very clear that you don't consider him your grandson." I was upset, my mother said defensively. "I didn't mean it like that." "How else could you possibly mean your son isn't our grandson?" I asked. She looked away. "You're making this so difficult, Melissa. We're trying here." "What exactly are you trying to do?" Because showing up with a gift that deliberately ignores the choices we've made for our son doesn't feel like respect. It feels like another attempt to control the situation. "We want to be part of his life," my father said. "We're his grandparents." "Being grandparents is a privilege, not a right," I replied. "And it comes with the responsibility to love and accept him exactly as he is not, despite who he is." My mother's eyes narrowed. "What do you want from us, Melissa? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry if what I said hurt your feelings." "If," I repeated. "And it's not about my feelings. It's about Jake. It's about the fact that you rejected him because he's biracial. It's about the fact that you've never fully accepted David because he's black." "That's not fair," my father protested. "We've always been polite to David." "Polite?" I laughed without humor. "Is that what you think a loving family is? Polite?" Just then, David returned from his run. He paused in the doorway, assessing the situation. "Everything okay here?" he asked, coming to stand beside me. "My parents brought a gift for Jake," I explained. "An outfit with my family's last name on it." David's expression hardened slightly, but his voice remained calm. "Jake's name has been legally changed. He has my last name now." "This is between family," my father said dismissively. "David is family," I said firmly. "He's my husband and Jake's father. Anything you have to say can be said in front of him." My mother stood up abruptly. "This is impossible. We came here trying to make peace, and you're just throwing our mistake in our faces." "A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday," I replied. "Rejecting your grandson because of his race is a choice. A harmful, hurtful choice that shows exactly who you are and what you value." "So that's it?" my father asked. "One comment and we're cut off forever?" "It wasn't just one comment," I said. "It was a lifetime of conditional love, of favoritism toward Amber, of subtle and not-so-subtle racism. The comment at the hospital was just the final straw." My mother gathered her purse. "When you're ready to be reasonable, you know where to find us." As they left, I noticed my father looking back at Jake with what seemed like genuine sadness. For a moment, I felt a pang of doubt. Was I being too harsh? Then I remembered my promise to Jake, to protect him from anyone who would make him feel less than perfect exactly as he is. "That was intense," David said after they'd gone. "Are you okay?" I nodded, holding Jake a little closer. "I'm okay. I think I finally see them clearly for the first time in my life. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have given them another chance or stood your ground? Let me know in the comments." The manipulation. The fallout from that confrontation was swift. My sister called that same evening, sobbing hysterically. "How could you do this to them? They're trying so hard, and you're being completely unreasonable." I put the phone on speaker so David could hear. We'd agreed to be completely transparent with each other about all communications with my family. "What exactly are they trying to do, Amber?" "They brought a gift with the wrong name on it and offered a non-apology. They haven't once acknowledged what they did wrong. They're old. They grew up differently. You have to make allowances. I don't have to make allowances for racism toward my son, I replied firmly. And being older isn't an excuse. People can learn and grow at any age if they're willing. This isn't just about you anymore, Amber snapped, her tone changing from pleading to accusatory. Do you know what you've done to our family? Mom and Dad are devastated. Greg and I are having to help them financially now. We had to postpone our vacation plans. Is that what you wanted? And there it was, the real issue. Not concern for Jake or even for our parents' feelings, but the inconvenience to her lifestyle. No, Amber. What I wanted was for my son to have loving grandparents who would accept him unconditionally. What I wanted was for my husband to be treated with respect. What I wanted was a family who could see past their prejudice to love a beautiful, innocent baby. You're so self-righteous, she hissed. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're punishing all of us. I couldn't help but laugh. Jealous? I've been supporting you and our parents financially for years, while you enjoyed the emotional support and preference I never got. What exactly should I be jealous of? She hung up without another word. The next day, a mutual friend called to check on me. Your mom has been telling everyone at church that you've abandoned the family because of some misunderstanding. She's really playing up the poor grandmother angle. I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. What did you tell her? I told her there are always two sides to every story. And knowing you, I doubted it was as simple as she was making it sound. I was grateful for the support, but exhausted by the drama. That night, I broke down in David's arms. Maybe I should just give in, I sobbed. Let them back in with conditions. It would be easier. David held me tightly. Easier for whom? Not for Jake, not in the long run, and not for you either. You'd just be going back to the same pattern you've been trying to break. He was right, and I knew it. But the weight of standing up to a lifetime of conditioning was crushing me. The next morning, I woke up with new resolve. I went into Jake's room and watched him sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm surrounding him. In that moment, I knew I would walk through fire to protect him, even if the fire was set by my own family. Over the next few weeks, the manipulation tactics escalated. My father sent an email claiming his health was deteriorating due to stress. My mother left tearful voicemails about how they just didn't know how to express themselves properly. My aunt called to say they were really trying to understand these modern views on race. None of these messages contained what I had asked for: a genuine acknowledgement of their prejudice and a commitment to treating Jake with the same love they would show any grandchild. The most unexpected tactic came when my mother showed up at my workplace with a photo album. She cornered me in the parking lot as I was leaving. I brought pictures, she said, her voice trembling, from when you were a baby. I thought, maybe you'd forgotten how much we love you. I looked at the album but didn't take it. Mom, I haven't forgotten anything. That's the problem. I remember everything, including how you treated David from the moment you met him and what you said about Jake in the hospital. People make mistakes, she cried, loud enough for my coworkers to hear as they walked to their cars. Are you going to punish us forever? This isn't punishment, I said quietly. This is protection. I'm protecting my son from growing up feeling the way I did, like I was never quite good enough, like I had to earn love that should have been freely given. Her expression hardened. So that's it? We're not allowed to be grandparents because of one comment? You're allowed to be grandparents when you can truly accept and love Jake for exactly who he is, a beautiful biracial boy who happens to be your grandson. When you can respect David as my husband and Jake's father. When you can acknowledge the hurt you've caused and commit to doing better. She shook her head. You're asking too much. I'm asking for the bare minimum, I replied. And the fact that you think it's too much tells me everything I need to know. As she walked away, photo album clutched to her chest. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The mother I had always wanted, the one who would love me and my family unconditionally, didn't exist. And acknowledging that truth, painful as it was the first step toward healing. 6 months passed. Jake was growing strong and healthy. He had David's expressive eyes and curious nature. His first tooth appeared, followed quickly by a second. He was starting to babble, making sounds that seemed just on the verge of becoming words. David and I had settled into parenthood, finding our rhythm as a family. I returned to work part-time, with a wonderful babysitter named Camilla caring for Jake during the day. After 3 months working this reduced schedule, I decided to return to full-time work when we found that Camilla was available for extended hours and Jake had bonded so well with her. We put our house on the market and found a new home in a diverse neighborhood with excellent schools. Life was moving forward. The contact from my family had gradually decreased. After the confrontation in the parking lot, my mother had made a few more attempts to contact me, always with the same message about how I was being unreasonable, never with a genuine apology or acknowledgement. My father sent a card on my birthday with a check for $500 as if money could solve the problem. I returned the check with a note. What I want from you can't be bought. Amber had stopped contacting me entirely after I blocked her number due to her increasingly hostile messages. Apparently, she and Greg had had to significantly adjust their lifestyle to help our parents financially, and she blamed me entirely. Through mutual friends, I heard that my parents had told everyone I was keeping their grandson from them out of spite. Some believed them, but others questioned their story. My mother's reputation in our small community had suffered when people realized her grandchild was biracial and connected the dots about why I had distanced myself. I wasn't proud of their social discomfort, but I couldn't deny feeling a grim satisfaction that there were finally consequences for their prejudice. Then came Thanksgiving, our first major holiday as a family of 3. In previous years, I would have spent weeks preparing for the family gathering at my parents' house, cooking, cleaning, buying expensive gifts, all while enduring subtle criticisms and comparisons to Amber. This year, David and I decided to host a Friendsgiving instead, inviting colleagues, neighbors, and friends who had supported us through everything. David's parents flew in from Texas, bringing warmth, love, and acceptance with them. As I watched my father-in-law gently rocking Jake, singing softly to him in Spanish, a language he was teaching himself so he could pass it on to his grandson, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was what family should be: people who love you without conditions, who celebrate your joy and support you through pain. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my father. We're all at the house. There's a place set for you, David, and the baby if you want to come. No apology, no acknowledgement, just an expectation that we would drop everything and come running at their invitation. I showed the message to David. What do you want to do? He asked. I looked around at our home filled with people who truly cared about us. At Jake being showered with affection by his other grandparents. At the life we had built together. I want to stay right here, I said. With our real family. I sent a brief reply. We have plans. Happy Thanksgiving. Later that night, after our guests had gone and Jake was asleep, David and I sat on the couch with glasses of wine. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Cutting ties with them? I considered the question carefully. I regret that they couldn't be the parents and grandparents we needed them to be. I regret that Jake won't have that relationship with them, but I don't regret protecting him and us from their toxicity and prejudice. David squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I think you're the strongest person I've ever known. Standing up to family is harder than standing up to anyone else. I had something worth fighting for, I replied, looking toward the nursery where our son slept peacefully. Someone worth protecting. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Maybe years. The weight of trying to earn love that should have been freely given was finally lifting. In its place was something lighter. Brighter, the knowledge that I was breaking a cycle. That Jake would grow up knowing his worth wasn't tied to his performance or appearance or how well he could please others. He would grow up loved, exactly as he was. And that was worth everything I had sacrificed. Who else has had to make tough choices to protect their children from negative influences? How did you handle it? Share your stories while we approach the conclusion. 3 more months passed. Jake's first birthday was approaching, a milestone I once imagined would be celebrated with my entire family. Instead, we planned a small party with close friends and David's parents, who had become increasingly present in our lives. Then, 2 weeks before Jake's birthday, I received an email from Amber with the subject line, My heart raced as I opened it, fearing the worst. Had something happened to one of our parents? The message was long and detailed. My father had experienced complications related to his diabetes and needed an expensive procedure that their insurance wouldn't fully cover. The email ended with, If you still care about this family at all, you need to help us. You have the means, and it's your responsibility. I showed the email to David and to my therapist. Both reminded me that I wasn't responsible for solving problems I hadn't created. Still, a part of me wanted to help. Thanks to my work in healthcare administration, I knew resources most people overlook. I called the hospital where my father was being treated and spoke with the financial department. I discovered they had assistance programs that could cover up to 80% of the costs for patients in my father's situation. I forwarded this information to Amber. Her response was revealing. We don't want charity. We want you to take responsibility for your family. I realized then it had never been about help, it was about control. They preferred to blame me rather than seek available solutions that didn't come through me. The day before Jake's birthday, my parents appeared at our door. My mother held a package. We've come to see our grandson, she announced, as if the past 9 months hadn't happened. You've come because you need money, I replied. And because he's our grandson, my father added quickly. Look, we brought a gift for him. Inside the package was a baby outfit with my family's last name embroidered on it, just like the one they'd brought months ago. but larger to fit Jake's growth. Jake only has David's last name now, I reminded them. And you need a sincere apology and change in behavior before having any role in his life. You're punishing us for one comment, one moment of concern, my mother exclaimed. No, I'm protecting my son from growing up feeling there's something wrong with him because of his skin color. When you understand what you did wrong, really understand, you can call me. Until then, our conversation is over. As they left, I heard my mother mutter, "She'll come around when she needs us again." But she was wrong. I didn't need them anymore, not in the way I once thought I did. I had built a life full of genuine love and support. I had learned to recognize my own worth. And most importantly, I was giving Jake what I had never had: unconditional acceptance. That night, as David and I put the finishing touches on the decorations for Jake's birthday party, I felt a profound sense of closure. The cycle of conditional love, of prejudice, of emotional manipulation had ended with me. Jake would grow up in a home where he was celebrated for exactly who he was, not judged for what he couldn't or shouldn't be. "Happy birthday, sweet boy," I whispered, as I checked on him sleeping peacefully in his crib. "You are loved beyond measure, exactly as you are." The next day, surrounded by friends who had become family, we celebrated Jake's first year of life. There were no tears, no family drama, no undercurrent of tension, just joy, laughter, and love. As Jake smashed his hands into his birthday cake, face lit up with delight, I caught David's eye across the room. His smile said everything. We had created something beautiful together, something worth protecting at all costs. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and Jake was asleep, exhausted from his big day, I found a small envelope that had been slipped under our door. Inside was a card signed by my father alone. It read simply, "I miss you. I miss what we could have been. I'm sorry." No excuses. No blame. Just the beginnings of what might be genuine remorse. I showed it to David. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it's a start," I replied cautiously. "But words are easy. Real change takes time and effort." I put the card away, neither rejecting it nor embracing it fully. If my father was truly beginning to understand, there would be more signs. And if not, we would continue on the path we had chosen, one of self-respect, boundaries, and unconditional love for our son. The choice was theirs now. We had made ours. Rebuilding with dignity. 1 year has passed since that birthday card from my father. Jake is now 2 years old, running everywhere, speaking in short sentences, and calling David Dada with absolute adoration in his eyes. Looking back at 36, I see how much I've grown. My life has changed dramatically. Although I had returned to full-time work, 6 months later I was offered a promotion. I accepted, but negotiated a 30-hour-week arrangement, something made possible by my higher salary, and the money I no longer spent supporting my family. This gave me something far more valuable: time with my son. We also sold our house and moved to a diverse neighborhood, where Jake will have friends from all backgrounds. What about the nursery I renovated in my parents' home? When I asked about retrieving some items I had purchased, my mother informed me they had already converted the space back into a regular guest room. The $5,000 I invested there gone, a reminder of how desperately I once tried to buy their approval. Through Uncle Robert, who maintained contact with both sides of the family and some mutual friends, I discovered that my parents eventually resolved their financial situation. My sister, surprisingly, took a second job as a receptionist in the evenings, something I never imagined she would do, but necessity forced her to change. Greg had to postpone buying the new car he wanted so badly. This caused tension in their marriage. Aunt Linda also helped financially, which brought the two sisters closer again. Uncle Robert has maintained contact, sending birthday and Christmas gifts for Jake and occasionally calling to check in. He's become an unexpected ally in the extended family, showing that principles can sometimes be stronger than blood ties. Aunt Linda and I developed our own relationship over time. After initially trying to mediate, she eventually recognized my parents' prejudice and became an occasional supportive presence in Jake's life, proving that some people really can change when they want to. 2 months ago, I received a letter from my mother. It wasn't a complete apology, but it was a beginning. "Perhaps we were unfair to you and your family over the years," she wrote, "and I said terrible things when Jake was born. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I would like you to consider giving us a chance to know our grandson." I learned through mutual friends that my parents faced not just financial difficulties, but also social condemnation when their attitude toward their own grandson became known in the community. I responded by proposing a meeting on neutral ground, a park near our home. I established clear rules: no comments about Jake's appearance, no trying to buy their way back into our lives, no unrealistic expectations. Our first meeting was uncomfortable, but civil. My mother cried when she saw how Jake had grown. My father was visibly nervous, but made a genuine effort to interact with Jake. I limited the visit to 30 minutes. David, though initially reluctant due to the treatment he received, agreed to supervised visits because he believed everyone deserves a second chance if they demonstrate real change. Since then, we've allowed small supervised visits every few weeks. Things will never be as they were before, and that's good. Our relationship now is based on clear boundaries and mutual respect, not obligation and guilt. The decision to remove my family from my health plan wasn't about revenge. It was about finally recognizing my own worth and my son's worth. It was about breaking a toxic cycle of prejudice that could have continued for generations. Today, I watch my son playing with his father in the backyard of our new home, and I know I made the right choice. He will grow up knowing he deserves respect, that his value isn't determined by his skin color, and that true love doesn't come with conditions. And me? I finally understood that I deserve the same. Have you ever had to make difficult decisions to protect your children from negative influences? How did you handle it? Tell me in the comments. For all of you in toxic family relationships, remember, sometimes the greatest act of self-love is setting boundaries. Sometimes the family that matters is the one you create, not the one you were born into. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story touched you in any way, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, you deserve more.